At the beginning of the day, we heard the quote by William Gibson, which was this quote: "The future is already here, but it's just not evenly distributed." And most people, actually, this is the end of my presentation. I'm starting at the end, not the beginning. So what I'd like to do is to prove why that is the case and see whether we can actually do something about it. Earlier today, Sue Bowl went into the types of games that are classified under serious games, and we've actually heard a lot about serious games during the course of the day. And being in the industry, we tend not to actually think about nomenclature as much. But in Germany, which is where I live, people are very precise about terminology, and they find the name tag quite difficult to cope with. They find it quite difficult to deal with. So, what are serious games? The umbrella term is actually known by a lot of different labels. There are games with purpose, applied games, persistent games, games plus. The little raccoon is as happy as I am. I like games plus because it's games that have an additional factor to them, not just entertainment, but they have content. But whatever the term is, it spans a very wide range of services as opposed to products. Games for health, games in education, games for change, corporate training. We've seen a lot of examples today, interactive simulations and gamification, etc. But what defines all of them is interactivity. I'm going to start with gamification just to have a look and see how we define it, and those in the serious games industry would actually argue with gamification being included under the heading of serious games, but I think it is valid to include it in the serious game camp, because the pool of expertise that's required for gamification does overlap with that of serious games. And this is how it works. So here we are, gamifying your voter canvassing. How to do it. Mission Majority. It's just been launched by the National Republican Senatorial Committee in the US, and it's an 8-bit style online platformer featuring a little elephant, as we see him in the middle there, and he's called Jopi. The jump and run game, it features enemies called job-destroying taxers, described as having been sent by President Obama. Now, jumping on these bad guys releases sound clips that are hostile to the Democrats. Yippee. And the game's intro states, "Hi, my name is Jopi. I'm one of the GOP's best volunteers for the 2040 midterms, and I'm here to show you how we can win back the Senate. There's going to be a lot of red tape and regulations in our way, but we need to overcome them in order to succeed." And to play the game, you have to, of course, log in via Facebook or Google+, or register with your email. Well, that's easy and cheap voter reach. Then we have a game that you probably all are familiar with. It's the Speed Camera Lottery. And it was part of the Volkswagen Traffic Initiative, or Fun Theory Award. So motorists entering a town had their speed measured by the speed camera. They were told that they were going to be part of the lottery. And those who were going above the speed limit would get a fine. They'd get a ticket, they'd be fined. But everybody had their registration numbers registered anyway. They had their photograph. And if they were going at or below the speed limit, their reg plates were entered into a lottery. And if they were drawn, then they obviously won some of the money that had been taken from the sinners, from the people who'd had to pay the fines. So it was claimed by the inventor, of course, being the Fun Award, or Fun Theory Award, it was claimed that it used the element of fun to get people to observe the speed limit, but actually it was probably more like using natural avarice, where people thought, okay, that's cool, I can win some money. But then winning in a lottery is, that's having fun too, I guess. The next up is health games. And these games include, we've heard many examples of them today. Health is a really, really, really big area in the serious games industry. And they include games for Alzheimer's. You've just heard from our previous speaker, the range of games that he's working on. There are also games in the United States, for instance. There's a company called Games for Life who've developed serious games for children with ADHD. That's their big thing. And the games, I think one of them is called Play Attention, and the professional version costs $2,995. It's your professional version of the game. And for your home version, it's a snip at just $995 for a game, right? They also have a game called Focus Pocus, also for ADHD children, and that is, I guess, tackling problems of ADHD. Whether or not it works or not, I'm not entirely sure. But it's only $299 for the game. Yippee. So they're obviously doing pretty well with that particular version of a serious game that is freely available. From the Netherlands, we have an app known as Heartville, which is a blended healthcare solution with real-life benefits. But looking around Europe, there are fantastic health games and serious games being developed for all kinds of applications. There are institutions like the Technical University in Darmstadt that is working on the kind of thing we've just seen out here, which is personalized physiotherapy games. So they're designed to specifically to cope with a specific set of problems and can be reprogrammed for each individual physiotherapy program. And then there's the success story that we're all probably most familiar with, and that is remission. Would you like to play the slide?
Lymphoma cells, already dividing. You got your target.
Let's do this.
All right, now you're cooking.
Any more?
Colony destroyed. A few cells have broken off the cluster. Get them before they regrow the colony.
That's better.
Remission was first created in 2006, and it was adopted as part of a post-cancer treatment regimen for young people, teens, and young adults whose outcomes were estimated to be poor as a result of lack of adherence to chemotherapy treatments. But Remission 2 was released in 2013, so that's quite recently, and it applies insights from a brain imaging study published in 2012 by Hope Lab and Stanford University together, showing that the Remission video game, the original Remission game, strongly activated brain circuits involved in positive motivation. Well, this reward-related activity is associated with a shift in attitudes and emotions that help boost players' adherence to prescribed chemotherapy and antibiotic treatments. And as a result, each one of the Remission 2 games, and there are 6 of them, is designed to boost positive emotion, increase self-efficacy, and shift attitudes towards chemo. And this is precisely where the value of follow-up research is demonstrated. I'll go into that a bit later on. But interestingly, Remission is free. It's available free for download on the internet. Whoops. Then we have games in education. Sorry. When playing games, these are the skills that are demonstrated. And they would be an absolute educator's dream if they were applied in class every day by children. So it's really hard to imagine why educators around the world, or everywhere around the world, were not already taking every opportunity presented to harness at least some of that engagement and that focus and the energy and channel it towards how we impart basic information and vital information to our future generations. Because, well, we saw the photograph. That's the child's dream, is to be prepared for their future and not for their parents' past. Then we have games for change. Games for change are conceived to raise awareness about environmental issues and similar global concerns. The first example here that you can see there, the first 2 pictures, was Pipe Trouble. It was actually quite a controversial game. It was developed and released in 2013 by a Canadian developer, Pop Sandbox, and based on the old arcade classic Pipe Mania or Pipe Dream. The player has to build a pipeline fast enough to satisfy the oil company's owner, but also has to deal with hold-ups, like community-led protests, farmers blocking development as the pipeline went through their fields. They had to pay fines and suffered eco-terrorist bombings. which was basically game over. The game aims to take the complex issues that surround oil pipelines and encourage gamers to start thinking critically about energy extraction. And despite the fact that it was satirical, the game still ran into some trouble. Apparently, the publishers were slated for having terrorist bombings in them. So the other image that we have here is the Earth Day pack, and it's very typical of environmental games for change, commissioned by Nat Geo. The Earth Day pack included eco-rescue rivers, where the player is an elite volunteer sent to save species around the world. And the second one is Planet Green, in which you're the newly elected mayor of Greenville. And it's a burnt-out industrial town that you have to give a new eco-friendly future. Then we have simulations. And simulations, Microsoft Flight Simulator, as you can see there, there's a whole range of simulators. Flight training was actually an example of the earliest uptake of games technology to upgrade and perfect an existing simulation training environment. Firefighters 2014 was a game that was developed by Rondo Media in Germany, a leading producer of first response simulator games. So ambulances, firefighting, that kind of thing. The third image is from a game called Lap Sim by a Swedish developer, Surgical Sciences, and it really is not just a nice to have, because its technological game build with haptic controllers avoids trainee surgeons having to practice laparoscopic techniques in live situations. You wouldn't want your granny to be there, I can assure you. Because with the experienced surgeon standing right next door, there's very little he can do because he can't see what's going on. With an open surgical procedure, of course, the trainee can be taught by the experienced surgeon, but otherwise, this is a perfect environment for that kind of so-called mission rehearsal. They call it mission rehearsal. And it has actually proven to reduce surgical error incredibly. It's like by factors of umpteen%. I don't know exactly what it was. I think it went down to 0.7% from 2%, and that was only in a particular type of surgery. So for neurosurgery, the figures are much higher. And it's actually been evaluated, again, in many studies, and it has had its construct validity established. So that basically means it's been trusted, or been tried, and it is trusted, and it's being further developed. Military training, it's also an area that Sue Bowl this morning covered quite considerably. They were also early adopters of this particular method of training. Business training, we've just seen an airline simulator before, earlier on. Airline Company Manager by Zone 2 Connect, German company. They worked together with Lufthansa and Siemens to develop this particular game. It's more like an actual game than standard e-learning style simulation, but it is Airline Company Manager. But whatever we think about serious or applied games, they're not going to go away. There are going to be more of them, and they're going to be more in focus than ever before, and whether we like it or not. But the thing that I'm fascinated by is why is it that in the United States, commercial organizations, educational authorities, and similar bodies, are quite matter-of-fact about using games, and especially gamification, whereas in Germany, especially, and the rest of Europe, but especially in Germany, the serious games industry is still struggling for acceptance. And more importantly, what are we going to do about it? The rest of Europe is not quite like Germany because, and I will look at that in a few minutes and give you an idea of why Germany is so different, but it is the largest single market in Europe, and where Germany goes, a lot of the rest of Europe will follow. So if we look at the two markets, we have to consider two key factors that influence success when attempting to integrate knowledge into an envelope of entertainment. One of them is money, and the other one is open-mindedness. And it is true to say that if you don't have the second, you're not going to attract the first. But in the United States, people are inherently more open-minded about engaging with new technology to solve abstract concepts. And they're happy to employ research funding to find game solutions. Americans have a can-do attitude, and it's backed up by the existence of political willingness, large foundations, and a high level of technical and practical knowledge. but it does actually take a certain mindset to be a pioneer.
It's funny if you try something new like baselining, because it hasn't been done by too many people before. Even though you know it's possible, there's still a huge mental block to overcome and to convince yourself that you really can do it. And I think over the next few years there will be a few people getting into it and really pushing the boundaries. I think that there are going to be some amazing things coming very, very soon.
Well, I'm sorry that that didn't work. It worked perfectly this morning, but you know, that's the story you always hear. Oh, it worked perfectly this morning. It was perfectly all right. And actually, the reason I wanted them to operate it from here was particularly for this slide, because it is so impactful. But hey, you'll just have to take it from me, or because you won't find this in the internet or anything. This is a very typical example of a company that is at the forefront of using this type of technology, using games technology to further exactly what it's doing, to further its own business case. And I think that you know, the fact that it's a German company makes me really, really thrilled, because we can point to instances like this and say, look, it is working, look, it is happening. And this is very important. There are companies in Germany and around Europe who are stepping up to the mark. And they're looking to this industry, to games, the games industry and related industries and technology for innovative solutions to their communications and other issues. I mentioned the Netherlands earlier on. I don't think I needed to, actually, because we had a very clear example of what's going on in the Netherlands here earlier on. But the Netherlands is really punching well above its weight in Europe. They've got the Utrecht Science Park, which is a center for R&D, and it's supported by the Utrecht University and numerous private companies and public sector bodies. And really, this is exactly the kind of center of excellence that is going to lead to improving standards around Europe and fostering the European serious games industry and driving it forward. We've got examples in Belgium, Austria, Ireland, positioning itself as a medical technology hub. France, can't forget France. France is a country where the mindset is similarly liberal to the United States regarding the interface between learning content and game environment. Excuse me. The Games for Change conference is held every year to discuss trends in the industry, and funding seems to flow in a much more unimpeded way in France, both regionally, Cap Digital is an example, as well as nationally. Excuse me. The European Games Developer Federation is also headquartered in France. But as pointed out in an excellent article recently published by Citra, your Finnish Innovation Fund, on funding at European level in the health games industry, although the money is theoretically available, and you've got the European Horizon 2020 program, for instance, the IT sector, there's 17 million euro in funding available for the serious games industry. But although that money is available, there's frequently a lack of competence in these bodies to evaluate the quality of the projects that are actually being presented to them. Even if a project represents best practice in game design and in healthcare, it might still not receive funding. Not necessarily, because the people might not know what they're looking at. In Germany, well, we're faced with the issues of a political as well as an attitudinal nature. From an attitude point of view, there's still resistance to the actual concept of games. On the deepest rooted level, in the German language, there's really one word, there's actually only one word for game, to play a game, and gambling. Spielen. So Spielen is traditionally stigmatized because that's all you have. That's all they have from a linguistic point of view, and it's the mindset that goes with it. They're very conservative. The Germans are very, very conservative, and the entire games industry is said to be an industry of Ballerspiele, which is FPSs, first-person shooters. And everything else that you try and tell them about the games industry, it's an uphill climb. It's starting to be accepted, but it's the government that holds the purse strings, and they're pretty conservative. Germans find it very difficult to accept the concept of passing along information in a ludic environment. That's the other thing. So consequently, the actual learning content is held to be of lesser value if it's framed in a game environment, in a playful way, than if it's presented in a linear style. So, for instance, in a book or by a professor, doctor, who has the authority and knows his stuff, and he's out there and he's telling you, and therefore you can be absolutely sure that that information is worthwhile. But there have been numerous studies carried out. We've seen enough of them. We've seen enough cases today, including by Tilt Factor, which is where Mary Flanagan is director. It's a game studio and research lab in the States, and it's been proven clearly that useful information, when it's embedded in a game or similar fun activity, is much more likely to be absorbed and retained by children and adults alike than if the learning environment is not interactive. Humans are playful creatures. And I've always said, and I stand by this, it's on my website as well, you may not stop playing when you get old, but you sure as hell get old when you stop playing. On the political side, Germany is composed of 16 different states. This makes a federation of thinking processes. So each has their own agenda regarding policy making, funding, education, and throws up barriers where none should exist. And in the serious games industry, we have to make a real effort in Germany to break down these barriers and make a case for a single mindset, at least, for Germany, over and above the efforts being made in separate states like North Rhine-Westphalia or Berlin-Brandenburg, to name just a couple. Education in games and their application and meaning is a very influential factor. And something very exciting happened this summer. On the 1st of July this year, the Higher Education Video Game Alliance was launched. And it tackles, at its root, it tackles education. 39 universities and colleges joined forces in the name of digital education. Across the United States, one of them from Europe, from Uppsala in Sweden, but also they embrace issues such as advocacy and funding. And it's headed up, the executive director is Constance Steinkühler, who was the former senior policy advisor to the White House, and she's heading it up. So you kind of see the connection there already. It's very, very close, and it's very meaningful. There are countless programs in the United States where educational institutions partner with government or industry bodies, resulting in a welter of high-quality serious games, like of the kind that Sue was talking about this morning. This is a great model for us in Germany and in Europe, where we've only recently seen, for instance, the degrees that are offered by the recently opened Games Academy University in Berlin. It was established last year, and they are now going to have their diplomas, their degrees, recognized by the government. This is groundbreaking for Germany. It's huge because, of course, then you have all your student funding and all those things that carry on behind it. The university was partnered by one of Germany's largest textbook publishers, Klett, and it is growing fast. I'm very pleased to see. So in Germany, this is necessary because, unlike what Doug said earlier on this morning, Germany, you need to have a qualification. You need to have a diploma. You need to have it in your hand, and this is a very important thing. So it gives a sense of purpose to people who are being educated within the games industry, and it gives them something to show for it. Not just, oh, I spent some time at an academy somewhere, and I've come away with all this experience. And it's important to remember that unlike entertainment games, serious games are very often commissioned by public health authorities, but also by interested companies or a PPP, a public-private partnership. And they need a lot more effort to achieve good market uptake results and funding for the post-release research that's needed to ensure that the game actually has agency or does what it says on the box. especially in health games where quality of life as a minimum is often at stake. So where does the money come from? There are institutions, philanthropic institutions, like the one that's, I haven't depicted it here, but it is the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and that's probably the best known of its kind, set up 40 years ago by one of the founders of Johnson & Johnson. Under their Culture of Health program today, they're tackling, amongst other issues, as we've seen before, obesity among school children. But there are now some independent movements starting to set up initiatives, like the recently announced SQVest crowd investing platform. It's a crowd investing platform that will specifically be targeting healthcare and fostering and funding healthcare. It's going to be launched at the OneSpark Live Crowdfunding Festival next week in Berlin. But there's still a need to raise awareness amongst the traditional biopharmaceutical companies, the life sciences concerns of games as an effective knowledge transfer medium. And then we have the corporate social responsibility programs. I saw the word up here earlier on. I've been told not to use it. I've been told that term is burned out. It's now known, amongst other things, as social performance index, because it sounds better, or public values scorecard, which I found even more interesting. But businesses have these funds, and businesses as diverse as banking, financial services, nutrition, the automobile manufacturing sector, etc. And cynics like to point a finger at the fact that these corporates are all about gaining competitive advantage and that this spend is an excuse to gain social acceptance, artificially. And I say, who cares about what the motivation is as long as they can be persuaded to spend the money in the development of brilliant, fun-to-play games, technologically outstanding simulations, and engaging interactive transmedia storytelling, because it's life-changing stuff. This is what we need. And there's another factor that differentiates serious games from any others. Unlike commercial off-the-shelf games, the consumer is frequently not the user. So this makes it much more difficult to set those budgets and go-to-market strategies in classic business case presentations. The consumer who actually pays for the product is often unlikely to get any perceived use out of the product, functioning more as a middleman or a facilitator for the game's development and distribution. So this is another factor that makes serious games a difficult sell. So what can we do about this? I mentioned transmedia earlier on. With the increasing interest, and it really is, especially here in Europe, I don't know what it is in America, but transmedia in Europe is very much on everybody's lips, or 360-degree storytelling, they call it as well. With that, incorporating expertise from fields as diverse as film and TV production, book publishing, interactive graphic novels, game development, etc., people are generally realizing now that we have to engage with people, with our audiences, target groups, differently. Because this is the first time in the history of mankind that we've actually such a high level of participation in our own entertainment. And we want to take this further. We want to transfer that sense of agency to other areas of our activity. And as this becomes more mainstream, serious games will not only become more important, they'll also be better made, because levels of expertise will rise among those who are making them. They will get better at working in teams composed of professionals from a variety of different skills. They'll become more flexible and adaptable. If we encourage these partnerships, that's what's going to happen. So we in the games industry, the serious games industry, must intensify our efforts to do that, to seek out and bring together institutions where this excellence can be fostered, the partnerships that include the primary constituents of government support, education and research, corporations, scientists, game developers, and publishers. We have to create more forums like this one, providing useful platforms for players from all sides of the spectrum, raising standards and making sure they stay high, so that producers of all kinds of serious games will be enabled to provide global solutions that they can be proud and happy to roll out to the world at large. And I see this as being the task of everyone who has an interest not only in the serious games industry and the technology that drives it and that is derived from it, but also in the future of things that make our society function. Good education, good health, a robust and flourishing environment, stability and resilience. Because, as William Gibson said, as I said right at the beginning, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. But I do believe that in our industry, throughout Europe, including Germany, and in America, and wherever it is, in the Antipodes, but the focus of my discussion today was right here, we can actually even things out a bit. Thank you.